Richard Quest. He is following developments from London. And Richard, I sent you a note a short time ago because I want to ask the question that I can understand why we're avoiding asking it this way, but I believe it's a question that has to be asked at this point. If this plane had landed safely anywhere, we'd know it by now, wouldn't we?
There is absolutely no question. If this plane, bearing in mind the data, Tony, of what we know of where the plane was, where it was last recorded on radar off the coast of Brazil, the direction it was heading, the last known contact with the plane, it is just about inconceivable that it landed anywhere other than the water at the moment. So the answer to your question, and at the time that we know about it, it was at 35,000 feet, trailing over at nearly 500 knots. So the answer to your question is that this has been a catastrophe and the plane has basically left the sky.
All right, so let's take a big step back, Richard, and let's share with everyone everything that you've been learning over the last couple of hours about this flight.
The plane took off from Brazil, from Rio, and headed up north. It then went oceanic over the eastern seaboard of Brazil, and that was the last known contact of the plane as it went over one of the islands. About half an hour after that, about, 2:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, apparently the plane reported hitting turbulence, severe and serious turbulence. Thereafter, AirFrance says it received an automatic message of systems of electrical problems and pressurization problems. After that, the plane failed to make any further reporting in. The next thing we know is several hours later, the air and sea search began. Tony, it is basically this. The plane takes off, it flies up, it starts to head out into the ocean, it goes over several of the islands, and that's the last we know of it.
Hey, Richard, why, you mentioned several hours. I don't know how many hours constitutes several in this case, but why several hours between the last contact and the onset of the search?
I looked at that, and I'm still looking at it. It's exactly 3 hours, according to the Brazilian Air Force. I posed that question to experts. One expert, if I can just reply, has replied saying that it seems a fairly fair response time. The Air Force would have to call in a crew and maintenance, brief a mission. 3 hours is a pretty good response time, according to one person who's responded to me on this question. I just don't know. It seems a long time. All I can say is that I would have thought if it was over the North Atlantic or the western part, that would be quicker. But Tony, let's just remember that this plane was flying at altitude. It had over 200 people on board. It had a catastrophic failure. And this is the sort of thing that happens when, we remember at this point, flying's dangerous, but not that dangerous.
Well, Richard, thank you for taking on what I think is at least one of the critical questions at this point. Richard Quest for us in London. Richard, thank you, as always. The end